Fights. What can I say about them? One Piece has quite a few, yet none of them are quite as special as one fight in particular. One fight that stands above them all. Luffy versus Kaido. But Luffy versus Katakuri is also alright, I guess, so let's just talk about that. The first reason this fight is so compelling is because of Katakuri's character. The first thing we hear about him is how he's a perfect man, and how if you search up the definition of perfect in the dictionary, it's a picture of Zoro's chest. Katakuri is also alright, I guess. But in all honesty, Katakuri's introduction portrayed him to be someone without flaws, which is, well, I'll just say it's the complete opposite of Luffy. Luffy's the definition of flawed. He's stupid, irrational, and acts without thinking, mostly because he's incapable of doing the thinking. From his introduction, they are shown as complete opposite. This is also shown through their scars. Luffy doesn't bother covering his scars and honestly sort of flails them around proudly. On the other hand, Katakuri goes to extreme lengths to cover them. Like, extreme lengths. That scarf looks like the most uncomfortable thing to ever exist. Regardless of questionable fashion choices, both characters appear to be the exact opposite of one another. However, upon a closer look, they look a lot similar than you may think. And don't worry, I've looked at Katakuri very close. But for real, both of them care extremely about their families. Katakuri about his biological family and Luffy about his crew, which is the only real family he's ever had. Speaking of families, both of them have also had shitty family situations. But also, to be fair, that's like every single anime character ever, so let's move on. They're also both held in high regard by the people around him, and this even extends to their devil fruits, which are extremely similar to one another, yet completely different substances. Ideologically speaking, both of them are complete opposites, but at the same time, they are similar. It's like happiness and Foxy. They are both the complete opposite, but they are similar because you can't spell happiness without penis, and Foxy was a massive dick. That was the most unfunny joke I've ever written. However, while all of this has been said, there is still one major issue to address about this fight. Their fighting abilities. You know, it's kind of important with this video being about a fight and all. Katakuri was leagues above Luffy. He was faster, stronger, and better at using his devil fruit. The most important part of this fight, his observation haki, was so much better than Luffy that it was laughable. Honestly, most of this fight was just Katakuri beating him up and Luffy getting back on his feet. However, that's what makes this fight so good. At no point does it seem like Luffy can win this fight. No one in the entire world except for Luffy believed he could win this fight. Except for maybe us, because we know he's the main character. Regardless, what I'm trying to say is Luffy's stubbornness and his refusal to give up is one of the aspects that made this fight so good. He constantly got back up and refused to leave until he could win. Even when it seemed like he was running away, he always came back. Unfortunately, Dragon cannot relate. Another thing that makes this fight so good is that Luffy was improving drastically. Throughout this very long fight, we saw Luffy get stronger and stronger, whether it be learning haki or, well, learning haki, I don't know why I added the or. He was constantly improving. Without this fight, Luffy probably wouldn't be in the billion bounty power range, which made this fight all the better. We were on a journey contained within this fight. Throughout this fight, we were addicted to seeing Luffy eventually go on his journey to be able to use future sight haki. And honestly, to me, the moments when we got to see the crew trying not to die weren't even that entertaining. In any other arc, they would have been so good, but Katakuri versus Luffy took the center stage. For those 19 chapters, only Luffy's goal to improve mattered to me. Seeing him refuse to leave and risk dying just to get stronger and beat Katakuri was so inspirational to me, and I think everyone agrees. For those 19 chapters, we were in our own story. However, at the same time, Katakuri had a goal as well, to beat Luffy up and prove to his family that he was perfect. However, from the very first scene, we can see that he is a bit nervous. He says that Luffy's ability to dodge is annoying, and we can soon see that he's nervous about his image of perfection. Katakuri had a massive weight on his shoulder. He had to remain a perfect human and a perfect big brother for his entire life. However, this all changed at the turning point that was, well, this. After Katakuri's house and his image of being perfect broke, we saw how his goal changed. He no longer cared about being perfection, he just wanted to have a fair fight with Luffy. Katakuri's image of being perfect eventually led to him believing it himself, so when it was ruined, so did his need to be perfect. He stopped treating Luffy like a failure and thought that both of them were equal. As he said over and over again, he stopped underestimating Luffy. He also said donuts a lot of times, but alright, it's fine. I don't get why you'd bring up Luffy's brother while fighting Luffy, but whatever floats your boat, Katakuri. Eventually, the fight stops being Luffy versus Katakuri, and it becomes more like Luffy and Katakuri trying to prove themselves. They no longer care about their original goals, they just want to prove that they are stronger. This is shown through the most iconic part of the fight, Katakuri stabbing himself. He liked donuts so much, he became one. Katakuri stabbing himself to make the playing field between him and Luffy equals one of, if not the most iconic moments in a One Piece fight I can think of. Honestly, this was the moment the audience went from cheering solely for Luffy to cheering for both of them. This fight wasn't even a fight anymore as much as it was a spectacle. Luffy, through sheer will and determination, managed to bring Katakuri around. Yeah, this is about Luffy's greatest power, his ability to bring people around. Luffy showcased how he can even make the most loyal family member become more of an ally to him than an enemy. Luffy's ability to constantly bring people around is remarkable and showcased at its fullest. And finally, we have the ending to his fight. I think Oda, being the absolute god he is, left the ending of this fight ambiguous on purpose. Both Katakuri and Luffy had collapsed, and while Luffy was ultimately the quote-unquote victor, an argument exists for both sides. I think the purpose of this fight wasn't to be a simple punch fight. I think it was meant to allow Luffy to power up while also showing us a new possible ally. But in all honesty, the fight scenes were also extremely dope. Seeing Luffy try to one-up Katakuri's Moki and watching how their hockey clashes shook the entire world was so hype. The location of the mirror world further added to the point I talked about earlier about this fight being its own storyline. The action scenes were crisp, and honestly, I really loved how they animated Future Sight. The concept was so cool, and watching Luffy learn a new form of hockey on the spot was amazing. Seeing how he refused to back down, all of it was just so good. That's it for me.